It is our great pleasure to introduce our next presenter from the United States of America, Dr. Kortney Peagram, President and owner of Peagram Consulting and Bulldog Solution from Chicago. Doctor of Psychology. And Kortney, we beg your pardon for delaying our start. We have been discussing very serious issues, as you've heard, and we're going to discuss the following: the structure of a successful bullying prevention program, empowering students and staff with the SEL to increase student engagement, trust, and self-esteem, and bullying awareness and prevention strategies in Illinois case. And we will have time for Q&A. Kortney, Dr. Kortney, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yes, we're okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. Thank you for having me. This is very exciting. So I really enjoyed hearing the last session, and I took some notes because today we're going to explore more as individuals, as educators, as parents, what we can do to help report, handle bullying, and also how do we develop our own magic stick so that we can have some tools to work daily with students. So thank you for letting me in the last session. It was really helpful to tailor my presentation to help you. So I'm going to share my screen in a few minutes, and we're going to go through the portion that I prepared for you. So give me a second. I'm really not that great sometimes with technology. Okay, here we go. And share. Okay, perfect. So we can see my screen. Awesome. Okay, great. So let me slideshow.
Yes, we can see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, perfect. So welcome to Combating Bullying Through Social Boldness, Kindness, and Connection. So my name is Dr. Kortney Peagram, but you can just refer to me as Kortney. I am from Chicago, and I am really thrilled to be here because I want to talk about what's currently happening in the United States and the stuff that we've been seeing, how pre-COVID, there's been some differences with bullying, and then also my experience, because I feel like through sharing what I've learned, being in the field daily with students can maybe be helpful for you too. Okay, next slide. Okay, so as we do this presentation, there's a few things I need from you. Number one is make sure that you have a pen and a few pieces of paper. So today, this is an engaging session where you're going to learn about different tools, but also practice them. Because if I just share what I do and you say, oh, that's great, let me try that, and then you forget about it, it's hard to replicate in the classroom. However, if you experience it in the moment, then it's a lot easier to recall after. So through each of the sections, I have different activities that we're going to be going through. So make sure that you have a blank piece of paper and a pen or pencil. So as we get started, so here's a little bit about me. So I'm a professor at Elmhurst University. I own Peagram Consulting, which is kind of merged to Bulldog Solution too, because during the pandemic, schools shut down in the US, and it was very difficult for us to do the work we did in schools. So I had to pivot, shift, and work on addressing my programs in a different way. I became more of an independent consultant and focused in working one-on-one and in small group sessions. So as you can see on the left side, the picture, that is me with my students. So instead of being more research focused, I'm on the gym floors, I'm in the classrooms working with the students. Where that becomes important is because we can tie research to practical application. As I mentioned, I'm a business psychologist, meaning that I focus a lot on processes, on understanding behaviors, and then finding ways to shift behaviors for positive outcomes. I work a lot with harassment in the corporate field on sexual harassment, And then in the schools, I work with bullying, cyberbullying. And I also do a ton of work and research on emotional management and emotional literacy. In other words, emotional intelligence. Now, why is that important? Because that's the key component on reducing bullying, is once we understand our emotions, we can help our students because we can identify and we can read emotions. So we're going to work on that today. So obviously I have a passion for eradicating bullying and cyberbullying. And then I also wrote a book called Dear Bully. It's on Amazon. And I think if you had, it's unlimited, regardless, the book is free. And if you care to read it too, I can send it because I believe resources are meant to be shared. Now, why is this book amazing? Not because I wrote it, thank you. But because what we did is for the past 10 years, we collected stories from different schools and we had the bully and the victim write to each other and they share their experiences of why this happened, what went on. So you get two perspectives of the bully and the victim, and they write to each other. So how we did this is we had students write letters, and then we were able to match them up. It's a very powerful back and forth to understand what actually is happening on both sides. Additionally, in the book, we put all our resources. So the stuff that I'm talking to you today is in the book. And it's easy to access. It's things that doesn't cost a lot of money. It's things that you can do just as an educator. And then so for fun, what do I do? I was training for my first boxing match. So even though I do a lot of social emotional learning and I love compassion and working with children, I also like to get some of that energy out. So I do some boxing and I love to meditate. It creates that balance for me. So I will pause here. Now, why did I put so much intention behind my introduction? Because that is the key to connection. We need to learn how to introduce ourselves so that children can relate to us, so teenagers can relate to us. So typically adults are not as interested in boxing, but teenagers want to know more about why do I box? People also want to know what do you bring to the table? So think about if you're working with younger children, what are some characteristics or fun things that you do that might be interesting to students? And then if you're working with teenagers, what are some things that might be cool, interesting, or unique about you that could create that connection? So here's what I want us to do. I just want you to take a few minutes on that blank piece of paper, and I want you to write, just like I did, some characteristics about yourself. Are you an artist? Are you a dancer? Are you a singer? Do you love building, creating? So write down some characteristics about yourself. Here's the why. Because once you can identify those and you can bring them to the table, students are more drawn to you. They want to get to know you and they want to share. You're building the first line of trust, which often we refer to psychological safety. And psychological safety helps students feel that they can tell you things without feeling shame, regret, feeling embarrassed. So introduction is the first key to reducing bullying. Because if they know you and they can share with you, then they're more likely to tell you when something's wrong about them. Okay, so take just a few minutes and write down some key characteristics about yourself. As you do that, I'll take a sip of my coffee. Okay. So now what do you do with that information? Now, one of the things I would recommend you can do is in your classrooms, you can work on the importance of introduction. So obviously we might be halfway through the school year, it's a little late, but here's some tools that can help you. So say you're new to a classroom, it is super critical that you not only introduce yourself, but every student in the classroom knows each other's names. I've worked with elementary school, middle school. So middle school in the United States is probably the age of 12 to 15. So that's a very difficult age. That was kind of more focused. And then I worked with teenagers. Now, being a professor at a university, I'm working with older students. So I've had a wide experience of different ages, cognitive abilities, emotional abilities, and also like how they interact with each other. What I found is regardless of how old you are, if you've been bullied or you've been exposed to drama, gossip, it's really hard for you to feel confident in a room to talk about yourself. Now, introductions happen easily. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks about how you create an inclusive environment right from the beginning. So one idea is to create table tents, name tents with your students and have them decorate them. So even my college students like to do that, right? Stickers, make them like little, you can use a piece of paper and, you know, because sometimes we don't have the tools or it might be expensive, and you just bend it and they put their names. I always ask my students to write 3 things about themselves that are unique, cool, fun. Then I ask them to use colors that they can relate to. In the United States, it's very important at this point in time to also know how they want to, their nickname or pronunciation of their name, because I found that educators, if they can't pronounce the name, they tend to not say it as much, and the child does not feel as included. And then if the educator mispronounced the name, sometimes the students will tease that child. So it's important to be good with pronouncing names, feeling comfortable, and using the children's names as much as you can. So introduction is critical. Now, how does this help you? So for example, I work with a wide range of number of students. Sometimes, though this semester, so from the spring, I have about 150 students. So you have to play a memory game here to remember everyone's names. That's why those table tents can be very helpful. Imagine you're stressed, you came from a meeting, you have a lot of things going on, you might forget someone's name, but because you have that visual in front of you, it can be helpful. Now, last but not least, for introductions, when you get students into group activities, I always have them reintroduce themselves. So to practice, to be comfortable sharing your name and asking what a person's name is, never assuming that you know who you're talking to, because often we forget people's names and then we get embarrassed to ask, and that fuels disconnection. So our goal is to create more connection points. So the first step to anything is introduction. Okay, now let's move on to the next steps. So today, we're going to talk about the negative behavioral spectrum. So I know in your other sessions, we've talked in depth about bullying and cyberbullying. I want to go through some of the cycles and how things have changed. So think about it as bullying as a spectrum. And then I want to go through the definitions. And we've been using a lot in the United States, which is called the social emotional learning. They're called skills. I want to break those down because they apply globally. And I want us to discuss what knowledge, skills, and abilities do you need to be able to teach those skills? Thinking about how do I increase children's emotional intelligence so that they can be aware of their behavior, their emotions, and rectify their actions so they can have positive outcomes. Then I'm going to give you the list of strategies that I use in schools so that you can take that and figure out, hey, this will work for me. Ooh, I like this tool. Now let's put it together. We're going to discuss activities that you can do in the classroom, in small groups and one-on-ones. And then I put together some daily routines that could be helpful. So that will build your SEL toolkit, right? So an SEL toolkit is a series of resources, activities, games, and strategies that are going to help you in a classroom. Since I am presenting to a wide range of educators, I'm going to shift from lower elementary, so like younger children, to middle school, which we would say from the ages of about 12 to 15. And then I'll talk about high school, which is from 15 to like 18. I will talk though about sometimes university students, how they are still in the lower levels of emotional ability and that they don't understand appropriate social skills to be effective or kind in a group setting. So meaning that they haven't been the opportunity to learn how to act with others, so they can sometimes be mean or inappropriate. So when it's not addressed at an early age, often they get to university and they use the same tactics they always used. So it's important to discuss that. Okay. Now, let's get to the definition of bullying. So I did my entire dissertation when I completed my doctorate on bullying. So I had a lot of research on definitions, but I learned that sometimes the definitions are so long that students can't remember what bullying is or not. So I wanted to simplify it into three easy words to remember what bullying is. So it's using your power. Okay, power being maybe you're popular, or maybe you're stronger, or maybe you're better with your words, right? So using your power to hurt someone intentionally, verbally, or physically over a period of time. So power, intention, I want to hurt you, right? And over a period of time. Now you might say, well, Kortney, cyberbullying, it can happen once, right? And then it's not over a period of time. So time is a little different when we think about cyberbullying, because the internet does not have an open and close button. It runs all the time, right? So over a period of time for cyberbullying, meaning if it goes viral, if it's shared, if it's transmitted to different people, right? So cyberbullying is indirect aggression. So it's behind the screen, students are hidden, right? And it carries out by one person or a group using electronic devices. So typically it happens through TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. And so in the United States, students think that Facebook is for old people, so they don't use it as much for bullying. They focus on other social media. And that's what my students tell me all the time. So now how do they do it is behind the screen, they find ways to attack others with the intention to harm. So it's important to understand to students that if you do bullying, if you do it online, it's cyberbullying, it's still with the intention to harm. And it's important to understand that the strategies don't have to be that different when it comes to online versus face-to-face, because it's a behavior that occurs because someone is hurt. So what am I talking about? No one is born a bully. So what happens is children go through traumatic events. It could be abusive homes. It could be a divorce. It could be neglect, right? It could be two parents are working so much to bring food, right, to the table that the children are often left alone, right? And because of that, they don't have the attention or love that they necessarily need. And so they try to seek that out. And they develop tactics we called ways to get that attention. And often it's seen as negative. So in the schools that I've worked with, most of the students that are labeled as bullies have had bad home environments. They're unhappy. They're unhappy with themselves. They're unhappy with school, and they want to hurt other people. Is it okay? No. But what I want us to remember is bullying is a label, and that anyone can be a bully, because anyone can get hurt so deeply that they feel the need to act out or do something, or they want to harm someone else. I mean, often we've seen it in adults, right? If someone says something inappropriate online, someone shouts about something mean, and it starts going back and forth, and it becomes this word war where people are being very mean and inappropriate and attacking each other, right? Which is conflict. Now, the difference, what happens with bullying, is power. That means that I have power over you. I can make you feel a certain way because of my words, my actions, and then you feel powerless. So that becomes bullying. Now, with the labels, it's important to understand that a child that bullies won't be a bully for their entire life. And it's important to remember that we can't put our biases towards that and just label that child. It's about taking the time to understand, why are they hurting other people, right? So when I worked in the schools, and I still do, I ended up working a lot with the children that were labeled the bullies, that the ones that couldn't be in a group setting, the ones that were considered troublemakers. Additionally, I worked in Chicago, and I'm sure someone's seen the news on Chicago. We're not known as the most safest city sometimes. I worked on which we call the South and West side of Chicago, where there's a wide range of poverty, violence, and minorities. So I learned a lot about the difference that sometimes theoretically is taught in schools, and me being in the schools and being like, oh, this isn't going to work. This strategy is not going to work. Why? because the school doesn't have the resources, because the parents can't help, because the students don't have the ability to understand how to love. Why? Because they were never taught it. They were taught to protect, to fight. And so you're coming in with this different mentality. So sometimes it's important to understand, back to connection, where's the child coming from? And then how can you help that child understand that their behavior is harmful? But before you even get there to getting to the changing the behavior, they need to feel seen and heard. I'm going to repeat that because it's critical. Every child needs to be seen and heard to be able to change their behavior. So that's why it's critical when understanding bullying and cyberbullying. Now, here's a few things. Additionally, post-COVID, so in the United States, most educational systems shut down for a period of 6 months to a year. Some schools went back. So let's just think of generally what happened. So students were online just like we were, and they had to go to school every day, and they didn't see their friends. They were isolated. So their interpersonal skills, right? So their ability to make friends, work in groups, interact with others decreased, right? In the United States, what happened is we just put them back into schools. You can imagine the disasters that happened, right? Children were able to relate to each other. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of gossip, a lot of rumors, mean teasing, right? And bullying kind of escalated. And especially at early ages, talking about kindergarten, children being mean to each other. So we need to understand that maybe ideally, according to the research, a child should be emotionally, cognitively here. However, I always tell educators, let's go back 2 years. They might be a little delayed on their emotional skills because they weren't exposed to it. So I even see in college students acting like they were in high school, right? I see a lot of children in high school late and understand that COVID impacted not only our adults or our work or our lives, but the children deeply when it comes to social emotional learning. Now, additionally, children have figured out how to bully a lot better on cyberbullying because of the access to technology. So it's important to understand that gossip rumors, usually from my experience in the United States, can typically start via online, and then they come back into the school. Now, how does this impact educators is sometimes you don't know what they're talking about because you haven't seen it, right? So it's really important to ask questions, almost put your investigator hat on and ask a lot of open-ended questions to understand what's going on. Is this bullying, cyberbullying? Is this possibly relational aggression, which is group aggression, where people starts fights, rumors, gossip, right? And figure out better what is behind the story and how it started. So you have all the facts important to you, because that can help you address bullying and cyberbullying. Lastly, the other thing that I've seen in schools that I've been working with is the rise in mental illness, anxiety, depression, lower self-esteem. And that has increased the amount of bullying, mean aggression that we've seen in schools. So it's really important to get a bigger, wider picture of what is actually going on so that we can help our students. Think about it as a wide lens. And once you see everything, you can assess and decide what would work best for your student. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the behavioral triangle. Now, this is a great tool you can use with students. I'm going to explain to you how I use it, and then you can decide to use it in any different area. So it's all about understanding emotions, behaviors, and thoughts. Let me take a quick sip of water. Okay, so the first part is understanding how these play together. So I thought like there's a psychological theory behind it, and I want to break it down. So how can educators use this? Okay, so emotions are actually a physical reaction in our body. So there's something that happens and that creates an emotion, a reaction, right? So emotions drive everything. So tired, hungry, angry, frustrated, jealous, happy, hopeful, excited. So all those emotions drive our thoughts. Now, our thoughts drive our behaviors. So now take the emotions and thoughts and put them together, and you have the outcome of what will happen. They all interplay together every day. So for example, say that a child comes to school in the morning and they haven't slept too well. They're extremely hungry, tired, and irritated. Okay. So then their thoughts are like, I don't understand why mom and dad fight all the time. It makes me uncomfortable. Then they start thinking, I think I'm the problem. I think I'm the problem. And so then the emotion kicks in of not feeling good about themselves, feeling sad, angry, resentful, right? And their behavior might be to turn around in class and start making fun of someone, right? Because they're so angry. They need to get that emotion out of their bodies, right? They need to get it out because it's stuck inside. So how do they do it? Is they behave in a mean way. They might fight, push, punch. They might make fun of someone. They might flip someone's book and walk away. So their behavior is a reaction to the emotions and thoughts going on in their head. Now, why is this important? Is behaviors need to be better analyzed to understand what is the thought behind and where's the emotion. Going back to what I discussed in the beginning, it's all about reading emotions and understanding how to manage them will decrease bullying. So for example, if a child is being mean to another child, what can you do? Well, I usually present this triangle and I say, listen, why don't we sit down and have a conversation? So today you hurt Amy's feelings. You said that she wasn't allowed to hang out with you anymore, and you started pointing and laughing at her. And my students would say, no, I didn't do that. Didn't do it. So they like to not tell the truth sometimes. So I would dig a little deeper and be like, okay, so I actually saw you do this. So, and I don't want you to think that you're in trouble, but I need you to be honest with me in this moment because we need to find a solution. So can you explain to me more before this all happened? What were you thinking? What was going on? So then Amy might say, well, I was thinking that, I'm tired of feeling like, and so here you can start to hear the feelings come out. Ooh, so then you can say, okay, so Amy's feeling this way and that way. And then she was thinking about this, and that's why she acted. So by having this visual for students, it can really help them decipher, better understand why they're acting the way they are. Visuals for students are critical. Why? Because they need to see things to better understand how it works. Now, often in the work I do, people don't understand that emotions impact thoughts and behaviors. So by using the triangle and going through the exercise, then they can see. And I always tell my students, emotions aren't something made up, right? They're a physical reaction in your body. So you need to figure out where you're feeling that reaction, right? Are you feeling it in your hands, your fists? Are you feeling it in your heart? Are you feeling it in your stomach, right? And what is that causing you to do? Typically, negative emotions fuel negative thoughts, and then negative thoughts increase negative behaviors. So the triangle is a tool for you to use to explain to your students what is going on. Now, in the example I gave you is me one-on-one with a student. And I always tell my students, if they're honest and open with me, we'll find a solution. I use empathy and compassion when talking to people that have done things that aren't okay. Even though I might be mad and frustrated, I try to calm my body and come from a place of understanding, which often is very difficult, right? So I have to work on my own behavioral triangle. And so I need to keep my thoughts to the side, right? I need to regulate my emotions by taking deep breaths and having an open mind so that I can come into a place of calm and understanding so the student will be honest with me. Because if they're not honest, you can't rectify the behavior. So that's an idea of how to use the behavioral triangle. Okay, so now let's move on to our social emotional learning. So what I did is I broke down the social emotional learning competencies. So how I like to explain competencies often to parents, educators, and students, it's knowledge, skills, and abilities. So that creates a bucket called competencies. Now, what we're going to do with these competencies is we're going to break them down, right? So these these things that they tell us to do, and we're going to figure out how to do it, when to do it, and why to do it. Okay. So the first thing is developing self-awareness and self-management skills to achieve school life and success. Beautiful. Okay, great. That's awesome. Like, that's how we do it in schools. Now, how do we do it? That's another question. So it's about developing activities and tools so students get to know each other. So for example, it could be worksheets, right? On who are you? Asking them open-ended questions about what is their favorite animal, color, right? What do they like to do on vacation, right? And it's about developing at least, I'd say, questions 25 to 50 that are in your SEL toolkit that can help you get to know children, but also so children can get to know each other, right? Because often when I work with children, they don't know who they are. They have no idea of what they like, what they dislike. They're constantly told what to do, and they don't have enough time of self-reflection. Now, the problem is if you don't self-reflect on who you are, it's really hard to have self-awareness. And then to be able to manage your emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, you need to know yourself. So this will not work if we don't start developing students and understanding who they are. Now, we come to the first exercise that I'm going to run you through that you can do with just a blank piece of paper with your students, okay? So all the tools that I'm preparing for you today, you don't need any resources. It's no cost. It's just things that are available, right? Because sometimes we don't have funds for expensive things or tools, and we have to work with what we have. So that was typically what I worked in classrooms. So I had to be very creative on how to help this. Okay, so let's say you have a blank piece of paper. Now, we're going to work on self-awareness. So what I do is I organize the classroom and I say, okay, so in this blank piece of paper, I want every student to write down 15 things that they're good at. 15. So I call them strengths. So I have them write a big S in the beginning and I put strengths. And I say, now write down 15 things that you're good at. You can imagine what happens. Everyone makes a big sigh and like, oh, that's a lot of things to think about. And I say, yeah, it is. But there's at least 15 things that you're good at that you don't think about daily. And that's self-awareness. So here's how you would do it. I would tell the students to write 15 things down. So I give them maybe 1 or 2 minutes of silence, right? And I have them think of the things they're good at. And then shortly after that minute, I start naming out strengths so that they can add to their list. So I'm going to have you go through this activity. I'm going to ask you to take a pen, a blank piece of paper, and write strengths. And then what you're going to do is for the next 30 seconds, you're going to write down all the things that you're good at, right? Are you a good teacher? Are you an athlete? Are you a good cook? Okay, so write them down. And in 30 seconds, I'm going to start adding strengths. And once you identify with them, you're going to add them to your list. Okay, now write those strengths down. Okay, so now if you identify with any of the strengths that I'm naming, please add them to your sheet. If you get more than 15, that's wonderful. Okay, I am an athlete. I am authentic. I am kind. I am creative. I am energetic. I have a strong attention to detail. I am organized. I am logical. I am a planner. I am a risk taker. I'm adventurous. I am a good baker. I'm an engineer. I'm good at mathematics. I'm a good problem solver. I have a huge imagination. I am compassionate. I am insightful. I'm a good helper. I'm respectful. I am curious. I am driven. I am determined. I am fun. I am funny. I am humorous. I go with the flow. I am creative in designs, and I love to bring things to life. I am supportive. I am passionate. I am a good listener. And I can go on and on. So the idea is you name enough strengths where students start to write those things down. Now, some tools you can use in the classroom is having a whole list of strengths and posting them so that student has the visual of seeing those strengths. Additionally, by calling them out loud, they're important. Now, I just gave you this snippet, this short version of the activity, but I have in my toolkit over 50 strengths from the alphabet, from A to Z, right? And it's really important as an educator to have those strengths in your back pocket, because when it comes to self-awareness, if you don't know who you are and what your strengths are, it's really hard to identify them in others. So now that you wrote down your own strengths, I guarantee you'll see them in others. So if you wrote you were kind and thoughtful, you're going to see that in your students. Those are strengths that you identify with and you see easily. Now it's important to share that with your students, being like, hi, like, you just did this activity and I'm looking through your strength sheets. I would add a few more because I know you too. So this activity is a positive way to create self-awareness, because once we know what we're good at, we can increase our self-esteem. And when we increase our self-esteem, we feel better about ourselves. When we feel better about ourselves, we're less likely to make others feel bad. So self-esteem is critical for reducing bullying. And how we build it is through strength strategies, strength training, right? And applying every ounce of self-awareness applicable that can increase a student's awareness on what they're good at, what they like, and how they feel good about themselves. Okay, so then what you can do is, after you have these blank cards, I call them strength cards, and I have my students keep them on them or put them on their desk so they can always see visually what they're good at. Now, how is this helpful? First of all, it's positive reinforcement. It also addresses the things that are good at, but you can always use this as a classroom management tool, being like, I'm going to put you in charge of this because you're a great leader and I want you to help me, or, you are very helpful. So could you please pass out the papers? By reinstating the strengths in the classroom, students start to own those strengths. They start to feel good and be like, yes, I am this. I am helpful. I am kind. I am intelligent. I am smart, right? So these strength activities create an increase in self-awareness. And then this is how you turn to self-management. By learning what kids are strong at, you can help them develop management ways to help with their behaviors. So say that someone has a lot of energy, right? So one of the ways they can manage themselves is maybe using that energy to do thoughtful actions, helping in the classroom, maybe being we call them like a buddy that helps new kids at school get to meet other kids, right? So by using their strengths, we can find ways they can manage their behavior in a positive way. Okay, so that's the first social emotional learning competency. Now let's move to the second. Using social awareness and interpersonal skills to establish and maintain positive relationships. Now, what does that all mean? So here's how I broke it down. It means, how do you make friends? How do you learn to apologize? And how do you forgive people? Even as adults, we still have to work on that. So by learning who we are, we want to develop our interpersonal skills, meaning how do we interact with others? How do we become friends? How do we show respect? And then the last piece is maintaining positive relationships. So in classrooms in younger ages, I always recommend that everyone is friends, right? When you get older, you can pick and choose your friends, but I really spend a lot of time on younger students on understanding that we're all friends, we will all show respect, and we will all accept each other. The idea is creating an inclusive environment, right, that is open to learning about others, and that is accepting of everyone. So if you do this at a younger age, it's a lot easier to address any gossip, rumors, mean teasing, and then all those things that lead to bullying, because you've set the expectations at a younger age. Now, oftentimes that doesn't happen, and then you end up later in elementary and high school with these negative behaviors. So let's talk and address just to the younger educators. Things you can do in your classroom. You can have a friendship contract, right? Where it explains what are your expectations of a good friend? How does a good friend act? What does a good friend do? How does a good friend show that they're a good friend? How does a good friend appreciate another friend? So a friendship contract can be very helpful for smaller children. And maybe they're still learning how to read or write, so you can do that as a tool to teach them. And every day, what I've recommended for teachers is having either a mantra, an intention of how are we going to be a good friend today? So today we're going to be a good friend and say hi to everyone. Today we're going to be a good friend. And if we see someone that's sad, we're going to go sit with them. With younger children, it's really important to give specific, clear examples so they know exactly what to do. They need to be told because they don't know, right? And I've learned more than ever that often when they were at home, some of the behaviors that we would assume they would know were never taught to them, about how to introduce themselves, how to ask people to be friends. I spent an entire session with students just showing them how to say, hi, my name is Kortney. Would you like to be my friend? Come play with me. They didn't know how to do that, right? So what they would do is they wouldn't talk to each other, and they would just yell mean things at each other, because they thought they were going to get attention and become friends. So what I do when I come into a classroom is I don't assume anything. I try to see where they're at and fit where they need to be. So how to make friends is critical. Now, if you're working with older kids, having a friendship contract and engaging them, asking the students, now, what is a good friend versus a bad friend? And identifying what that means. Then having them give examples of how they want to be treated. What does a good friend do? How can you increase trust and become friends, right? So those questions are critical for older students to critically think about friendship and what they want in their life. Now, for high school and college students, you have more direct conversations on assessing what is a good friendship and what is a toxic friendship, right? Because with the rumors, gossips, and the exclusion, sometimes it becomes very intense, and it's important to talk about what is a toxic friendship and what is a good friendship, so that students have a visual and know what to do when they are in a toxic friendship or a toxic relationship. So what's important too in high school is students might know that they're in a toxic friendship, but they don't know how to get out of it. So we have to teach our students on how to break up with friends. They don't know how to break up, right? So giving them strategies and having them practice, so what we call role play, is really important, so that they know what to say, when to say it, and how to do it. How do you break up with a friend? Which even for adults is kind of hard. So there's the mature way, which we would want everyone to do. And then there's the immature way. What people typically do is ghosting. So it's a big thing in high school, and even with adults, they'll just stop talking to the person and they don't know why or when. But let's take the opportunity to use the positive strategy to break up with your friend. It's about having a conversation. Now, if you're involved in this process as an educator, that means that you're a trusted adult, and that's very powerful. So you could be the mediator between the friendship breakup. And in that case, you might have a different contract, right? You might have a respect contract between two parties, two people, where it explains exactly what's going on and how are they going to interact together. So if I was to break up with a friend, the first thing I would do is I would set a time to talk to them. I would explain why I'm breaking up with them. I would say, you know what, Alex, I'm really sorry. I think that we're going in two different directions as far as our friendship, and I want us to respect each other and keep all our secrets and all the good times we had together. But I think at this point, it's good that we take a little break, right? So obviously the other person is going to feel rejected. There might be some anger. So it's really important with the triangle to go back to reading those emotions and addressing them. Being like, Alex, you know what? I'm really sad and upset too. I just need a little time. And then maybe after a little time, we can talk and we can see how things work out. But I think that it's really important that I kind of try my own thing for now and see who am I and what I want in life, right? Or you can say, Alex, sometimes when you're with your other friends, I feel excluded and it doesn't make me feel good. So I just want a break because I don't think you're doing it on purpose. I think that you're not aware of it, and that's okay because we're at two different spaces in our life and it's just time to take a little break. In theory, those are super easy. I just went through them. In practice, they're never going to play out how they're supposed to, right? But here's the thing, practice makes perfect, right? So the more that students practice these role plays, even if they make it silly, they make it a joke, then in the moment, they know how to do it because they're not taught how to break up with friends or break up with relationships. They just learn by doing, and often by doing it, they don't make the right choices and they, what we would say, burn bridges, or they cause conflict. And then conflict, if there's a differentiation in power, can lead to bullying. So it's really important when we end a friendship, if you have the opportunity to be an educator in that point, walking through students how to end a friendship can be really important. And that increases their social awareness and their interpersonal skills. Because students learn how to write, how to read, how to problem solve, but do they really learn how to deal with conflict? Do they learn how to keep a good friend, how to be a good friend? Do they learn to apologize? And do they learn to forgive? So next, after you go through the importance of friendship, keeping friends and letting go of friends, it's important to talk about learning to apologize, right? If students don't know how to apologize, they can't overcome what's coming, right? They don't know that they've done some wrongdoing and they're not rectifying the behavior. So, and it's important to have certain things in an apology. I am sorry for. This is what happened. I promise that I'm going to change my behavior or do things differently. And do you forgive me? So asking for forgiveness, okay? There's so many different ways to apologize, but there's 4 critical components. Is you can't just say, I am sorry. You have to say, I am sorry for, and address the behavior, right? Second, it's important to put some context of why this happened, right? So, because we're increasing empathy and awareness. Now, 3, you need to change the behavior. So as the person apologizes, share what you're going to change about it so it doesn't happen again. And then 4th, ask for permission to accept the apology. So with those 4 things, it's important to have that in the apology. Now, here's what you do not want in the apology. I'm sorry, but. So by using and negating the apology, it takes away from the action. So for us, it's really important to say, I am sorry for, versus I'm sorry, but it was your fault. Or I'm sorry, but you did this. That is not an apology. Okay. Next, the context of why this happened is important, but you can't blame the other person, or you can't blame someone else. I'm sorry for calling you names, but really it wasn't me, it was this person. It's not an apology, right? So it has to come from the individual about their own behavior and why they did that. So it's called vulnerability. It's in an apology, someone has to be vulnerable and admit of their wrongdoing. And it's almost against human nature to do that because no one likes to be wrong because it doesn't feel good, right? We want to feel good. So we're going to go towards what feels good. And when we do that, the problem is we're not growing. We're not learning. So being vulnerable is really important in apology. Now, asking for permission is critical, meaning that you're asking the other person, do they forgive you? And they might say yes, no, or I need some time. And that's their boundary. That's what you want to respect because you're asking their permission. And then when you're changing the behavior, so say you called someone mean names, the idea of changing is giving ideas of like, hey, so you know what, it wasn't okay to do that. And I will no longer be calling you those mean names because I saw how it negatively impacted you. Because sometimes people don't know that they're hurting someone until it's later. For example, what we call a lot is intent versus impact. Hey, my intention is to be funny, but my impact is I hurt your feelings. So turning to an apology is the best way to rectify the situation. Now, last but not least, it's about forgiveness. So this is the hardest. It is hard for anyone to forgive. Sometimes it's easier for some people than others, but there's certain things that it's harder for us to forgive. When someone hurt our feelings, went against our boundaries, right? Or went against our values, the things that we believe, if they violated that, it's really hard to forgive. Now, the question here is asking yourself as an educator, how do you forgive people? And how can you teach how to forgive people? So I always tell my students, I believe in forgiveness. And I also believe that we learn through experiences, so I don't forget. So you might hurt me once, I'll forgive you. You hurt me twice, and then we're done, right? I don't want to engage in negative, toxic behaviors, and I don't have to. It's my life. It's my choice, right? So with that said, it's really important to understand that forgiveness doesn't mean you can be stepped over and taken advantage by other people. It means I forgive you and I want to move on. I am going to let go of this. This situation will no longer play in my head. I am over. I am letting go. But I will not forget what has happened because I want to learn from this experience, right? So forgiveness is important to move on for the individual, the relationship, but it doesn't mean you forget what happened. Now, the flip side of this is meaning if you forgive someone, it's important not to bring it up every 2 minutes you can, right? So students might say, oh, I forgive you. And then they keep reminding the person of the mistake they made. So that is not forgiveness, right? So it's really important to explain that to students so they understand the purpose of forgiveness. It's to let go. It's to move on, right? It's to grow. It's to be able to feel good about yourself again. However, in the process, if you forgive someone, you can't keep bringing up their mistakes every time you can, because that is not forgiveness and that does not feel good. So those are some key components to really understanding how to create, maintain strong, positive relationships. So to recap, understanding friendship, knowing what is a good friend and a bad friend, learning how to break up with bad friends, toxic people, people that make you feel bad, learning to apologize, and learning to forgive. Those are skills that are underutilized and often not taught in schools. And that's why we have an increase in bullying, rumors, because people don't know what to do. So those are some key components. So now we're going to go and we're going to talk about decision-making and responsible behaviors in personal schools and communities. Now, what does that mean? Decision-making skills, being responsible. That means that you're deciding what you want in your life as a student. How do I want to be a student? How do I want to react with other people? What decisions do I have? So students have less of decision-making power as they're in school, but they have the power to choose how they feel about themselves. They have the power to choose how do they react to things. They have the power to choose how they treat others, okay? And that is being responsible. When you have the power to choose to treat others with respect and dignity, you're being responsible. You're bringing a positive school community, right? And that's what we want. So we want to explain to students what is decision-making and what is in your power daily. How do you make decisions so that you feel safe, you treat others with respect, right? And that you make decisions that have a positive outcome. That's the third social emotional competency. And we're going to dig a little deeper on that, and I'll give you some specific strategies when it comes to that. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now this is what is going into your SEL toolkit. So this is really important. Okay, so everything we talked about, now it's action items, meaning this is how we do it, when we do it, and why we do it. Okay, recognizing feelings and perspective of others. So that means develop skills and understanding of how others feel. So what does that mean? It's understanding how to read emotions. So back to that strength activity I made you do. So learning the same thing about emotions. So if you can have an emotional chart somewhere in your classroom, maybe on your desk, or maybe just on you. I have typically I call them emotion cards, where I have the emotion, I have the definition, and you can even find them online where you can have faces, right? So that having these emotion cards really are helpful for students to identify emotions. Even in high school, I still have students just know mad, sad, angry, happy, right? And there's so many emotions. If you were to Google emotion wheel, you'll have all the emotions. And that's important to use, because by increasing our students' vocabulary and understanding how they feel, they can use their words as power to express how they want to be treated, how they feel, and how they want to be seen. So those are critical points. Expanding the vocabulary when it comes to emotion is critical for emotional intelligence. So how do you do that? Creating either an emotional wheel or an emotional vocabulary sheet that you kind of talk about in class, right? And if you're teaching teenagers and you don't have necessary time, having it hung up, or using in your lectures or in your teaching different emotions that you might feel, or that if you're teaching history or if you're doing literature, talking about the different emotions that come up can be a really way to actually get through what you're trying to teach the students and expand on emotions. Now, next, it's learning how to identify others people's emotions. So teaching students how to see and read emotions is really important. In a younger age, often what we do is we show pictures, and I ask, like, what do you think this person is feeling? Or if we're reading a book together, I'll ask about, why do you think this person feels this way? How could you tell by reading it? So having students critically think through the character, the situation, and come up on how to understand what they see and what they feel when it comes to that emotion, it helps them identify emotions. Now, how does that reduce bullying? If before bullying escalates, there's a series of emotions that occur. If people can address that sooner, we can kind of squash it and stop it before it escalates. But we need to be able to read and identify those emotions before it gets to a point where it's too high. Now, next, listening skills. Those are hard. As adults, we have to learn how to listen, and we have to train our students to learn how to listen. Not just listen to talk, but listen to understand. Listen to put yourself in someone else's shoes, which means is using maybe strategies like recapping what someone said, paraphrasing, right? Or even repeating what someone says. Now, when I work with students that are escalated, that are going through a bullying situation, and they're agitated, aggravated. So how do I actively listen? I repeat exactly what they say in a calm, caring tone, so they feel heard. And by active listening and repeating what they're saying, I'm helping them calm down. Now, to develop these skills, it takes practice. So as educators, it's important to often maybe repeat or rephrase what a student said so that you can understand what they're saying and from their perspective. How does that increase communication? Well, if someone feels understood and feels seen, it's the first step to addressing bullying, because they finally feel that they can be safe and talk about what's bothering them. And that only takes active listening, right? That means that if you're actively listening, you're not interrupting, you're not talking about yourself, and you're not telling them what to do, which sometimes it's difficult if you're an educator and you don't have time, you're just trying to get the situation solved. It really takes 1 or 2 minutes to really listen, but you need to be mindful. You need to be present and in the moment, meaning that you're not on your phone, you're not on your computer, you are making direct eye contact, and all you're doing is listening. Okay, now, the other thing that's important for the action items is expressing and understanding other people's opinions and feelings. Well, before you can do that, you have to predict the feelings of different situations. So it goes back to the emotional wheel. Learning all the different feelings, you can kind of predict what will happen in these situations. So giving students scenarios or role plays or examples of, hey, so if someone is going to go at recess or on the playground and they are sitting alone, what do you think is happening? What do you think the person is feeling? So giving them examples to predict other people's feelings in different situations by you sharing the different situations before they occur can have students visualize what to do, how to handle it, and address the feelings. Now that helps with expressing and understanding the opinions and feelings in those discussions. So those two strategies go together. Coming up with examples of what might happen that are considered social conflict. It could be considered gossip, rumors, bullying, and then asking the students what would they do and how they would feel. And then asking their opinions as a group setting can be really helpful for students to visualize what they can do. Now you're seeing what I'm saying. So I think from my experience, often educators might not see what's going on, or even if they intervene, it doesn't help the situation. So what I'm doing today is I'm giving you the tools to teach your students of what to do so they can address it. Because more times than not, if a student intervenes in a bullying situation in a way that is positive and constructive, they can eradicate that situation, where it might take an educator a few times before they can stop the situation. Because student influence, peer-to-peer influence is very strong. So what we want to do is we want to give our students these opportunities to know what to do in the situations so they can intervene. We want to empower our students so that they know what to do. Last but not least, in these situations, it's about increasing empathy and compassion. So it's developing your social emotional intelligence so that you can help students by showing empathy and showing compassion. It's very hard to teach those skills and it takes time, but there's easy strategies you can do daily by connecting with your students, by learning about emotions, expressing emotions, right? And then asking about situations of how other people will feel in those situations. Now, next, when we're breaking down these SELs into action, it's about identifying the individual group similarities and differences. What does that mean? It's we need to figure out how we're connected, right? And what we can do to feel like we're included, feel that we're involved, and feel that we're safe. So we did a lot of activities that bring us to this point. So I'm going to kind of recap. So identify every opportunity you have of how the students have things in common, okay? Build connections, have group activities, as many as you can in classrooms. So if it's working in teams, if it's, oh, this is a trick I do every time in my classroom. Every time I start a class, I said, okay, everybody stand up and go say hi to 5 people. And I say, it can't be the person beside you. You have to move around the classroom, right? 5 people. And often they don't know each other's name. I'll say, remember to reintroduce yourself so that you know each other's name. Because I do it every single time I start my classroom, students eventually do it naturally and start having like small conversations about life, about school, and they start to build connections. It takes about 2 minutes of my time in a classroom, and it makes a world of a difference. Now, next, it's identifying what factors make some people more prone to bullying. So we talked about that. We talked about a bully is not born a bully. They're going through some things that are really hurtful. They are struggling. And it's about having those conversations and breaking down their walls so that they can open up and feel safe to share what's going on. Because if you get to the core of their issue, you can reduce bullying because you're building a compassionate setting so they can feel like they can get the help that they need. Okay. Now, how do we address bullying, conflict, and drama? It's basically what we've been talking through this whole time. Okay. It's going back to the students, empowering them, teaching them about emotions, and going back to what does it take to be a good friend? How do we show respect, love, caring, right? Those are all ways to reduce bullying. Now, one of the things that's important, and this goes for students that are a little older too, and high school, is defining what respect means. So how do you show respect? How do you deliver respect? And then with that, creating your definition in your classroom of what respect means to you. Now, as we start to recap, right? So the last thing that we haven't talked about too much, but we've planted the seed, is identifying the things that are stereotypes, stereotypical situations of bullying, or maybe things that we find prejudice, and having those conversations so students are aware when they have their own biases, right? And really focusing on developing those friendships in that inclusive environment every day. And that will foster teamwork, communication, and collaboration. Okay, so we're almost at the end, so I appreciate everyone's time. So now I put together additional strategies, right, for the problem solving and goal setting. Now, how is this helpful? It gives you ideas of how to break down things when you're faced with situations. So how to evaluate decisions when it comes to ethics, right? So those are for young, older kids, right? How do you analyze situations? Well, it's from exactly what we talked about, breaking down the situation into easy steps so students can evaluate their choices and make better decisions. And last but not least, it's about goal setting. Giving a student the power to set a goal to create change can be very, very powerful. Okay. So I did talk about compassion and empathy, and I do want to make sure that I have enough time for questions. So I'm going to go through this slide, and I am open. We can review this after, but I've talked about it throughout my presentation. It's about kindness, showing curiosity, presence, and beauty. Now, what does that mean? It's in every situation, there's beauty. In this situation, we're about 256 people together talking about things we can do to change the way that we educate our students. That's beautiful. That's powerful, right? So finding these moments of positive intent, of change, of creating that moment where you can see the beauty in a situation is very powerful. Now, next, it's about developing empathy. It won't happen tomorrow, but by planting the seed of connection and constantly reminding students of what they have in their power and how they can create positive change, will develop empathy. Now, here's my this is my secret slide that I like to show right at the end. Okay, so here's some easy tips and tricks. We talked about this, but I want to reemphasize these tools. Now, first, always having discussions about social emotional learning is really important, right? As educators, sharing your best practices will help you with your magic wand. Next, starting positive rumors, sharing things of success and starting positive rumors, being like, hey, did you hear about blah, blah, blah's person getting all good grades this semester? So instead of having negative rumors, start spreading positive rumors about people. Now, we talked about active listening, but social boldness is all about leadership. How do you choose to lead today? What will you do that will create a legacy, a powerful statement that you can increase kindness and connection in your classroom? Again, we talked about apologizing. Well, actually, I did the talking, but I gave you the 4 tips for apologizing. And next, with everything I just shared, it's up to you to figure out what tools will you use in your action plan. So that puts me at the end of my strategies. And now I would like to open it up for questions.
Kortney, thank you so much for your presentation, for your energy, and thank you for your time, because I think even though some of the people were listening to you in translation, 100% they were sure to receive this energy. Yes, thank you. Wow, that was just amazing. And it's our second session, and most of the people who were with us, they recharged their batteries. Thank you for your strategies. Thank you for your practical tools. It's one of the few presentations we have that give a real hands-on experience that they can just take from today and use it tomorrow. Thank you for engaging us in this activity. So everything you've talked about, we saw in your presentation. So thank you a lot for that. A special thank I want to say to our translators, dear colleagues, those who were listening to us in interpretation, just let me know if this was so emotionally synchronous and simultaneous. So thank you so much for that. Thank you. I see that the chat is full of the reactions. Thank you again. That was quite emotional. It was so hard actually to translate you in the emotional sense. Thank you. We do have a few questions. They are the following. Yeah, you talk a lot about the children, about the kids who are about the different forms of kids. So I'm just quoting one of the chats messages. So what if there is such a kid who is not from a socially, disadvantaged family? The family is super cool, it's rich, and the kid is happy from the social point of view, but this exact kid is a bully. So what happens then? If none of the factors are suitable to him, like he is from a good family.
So that's a great question. So here's what I would do. So obviously you can take my suggestion and possibly use it, but I want you to think about, is it truly everything is good in that child's life? Could there be things that maybe at home things are great, but things that we're not aware of? So I went and I worked in schools that were more in poverty, but I worked in schools that were very wealthy, right? Where the parents were well-to-do, very important people, and there was still bullying. And when I got to the core of it is sometimes we talked about in the beginning of trauma, right? But trauma is defined as something that is impactful on a situation that changes the behavior and emotions on someone in a negative way. And it could be something like behind closed doors, the child has no attention, right? So the parents are well-doing and nice, but they've never told their child that they love them or that they're proud of their child, or it could be sibling bullying happening in the home and the parents aren't aware of it. It could be after school programs or within the community, there's something going on. So I always tell educators to dig a little deeper, to understand that there might be something that it could not be in the home, it could be outside, but something's going on with that child. And there is rare incidents where everything is wonderful and the child is still causing a lot of disruption and mean behaviors. And that could be more of a social emotional disability where the child is not aware of their interpersonal skills and they have negative impacts. And that's very rare in those situations, but it could be that they have no awareness of emotions and behaviors. And that's why it's important to address that. So how you would fix that is going back to the behavior and teaching the child what is appropriate and inappropriate. But most of the times there's something going on with the child. It might not be with the parents. It could be with siblings, community, after school. And that's why they're acting out. It's a sign, it's a cry for help. I don't know if that was helpful.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so we will sum up and just say that bullying is the consequences of not worked out problems of the kid. So the next question, I think it's quite an interesting one, and I would like to thank our participants for that question. Just a second, I will read it out. The question is the following. As I understood, if I understood correctly, your technique, Kortney, is a cognitive processing of the thoughts, of the feelings, of emotions and behavior of the victims and the bully. So we have such a thing in our country. It is called somehow like fairy tale therapy. It's an indirect study of bullying through fabulous, typical bullying heroes. So do you think this technique is is a good one? Is it pedagogically balanced, or would you use this?
I love it. I think it's amazing. So the power of storytelling is how we change behaviors. So if you're able to share fairy tales or stories that relate the behaviors, feelings, and thoughts, that's incredible. Yes, I do encourage that. That's a great tool.
Great, thank you. Yeah, one of the comments on the chat, one of our participants was kind of a Sherlock Holmes, and he wrote us that, wow, we understand right now where does Kortney have this energy from. It's just because you have a huge coffee cup, so that's where the energy comes from. Right. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. We have one more question. Okay, the question is the following: How should an educator behave, or what should the educator do if the bullying situation is about the kid with the special educational needs? So what techniques, what strategies should we use in this case?
So I'll give you the short answer because it's very complex, but I'll tell you what I've done because I've worked with a lot of students with needs. So it takes a lot of repetition. It's harder to teach emotions and to get to the thoughts, but it's easier to change the behavior. So if you look at the triangle, you kind of flip and you focus on the behavior. So in my practice with working with kids with special needs, I would talk about going with what is appropriate and not appropriate and giving examples and having the student practice. And additionally, I would help the student by showing them emotions like physical. If they can see it physically, they can read it sometimes by seeing like, oh, when your face is red, it means mad. When someone has tears, they're crying. So it's going from behavior to showing what emotions look like, and then talking through the different things that go through their mind of why they did what they did. The most critical point is repetition. You have to repeat the action, repeat the change that you want to see, and then reinforcement, reinforcing good behavior. Even if it's he sat down on his chair and didn't make any noise, it is a celebration, because celebrating the small moments brings up incentivizing the child, so you'll have more positive outcomes. So it's repetition, being extremely clear and concise on the behavior that you want to see, right? And then asking the child to practice and repeat what you said so they understand is the best thing that I found that helped me with the limited resources that I had when working with children with special needs. I spent a few years trying to reduce bullying in schools, so we had to come up with techniques that they could understand and they could use.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really wonderful. And one more question we have. Yeah, it's just the comment. We should start from the ability to express their feelings and to control their feelings. So where can we, maybe you could share some, maybe we could share some resources where we could have ones on the little kids, like pre-kindergarten kids, resources and tools, maybe some, like a lesson plans or something they could just use, and it's free to use in a classroom to provide and to promote social emotional learning.
Oh, yes. So I have all my tools are free. So I can just send it. I have full curriculums that you can use. All I ask is if you let me know how it worked. But they start from kindergarten, and I have the different versions of how to use them at different cognitive abilities and levels. So I would be happy to share that. It's full lesson plans. I have them.
Okay, Wow, you are the present, you are the gift for all of our participants. Actually, there are so many chats because it's, it's in Russian. And if you translate the chat, you will see that a huge bunch of the like comments is about your book. So I hope you will have a lot of followers after our webinar. So thank you so much that you are so emotionally share all your resources and all your contribution, and you just make the difference. Thank you so much. I know that we have our following speaker in the room, but we will allow ourselves just to ask one more question. The question is the following. Have you ever faced the situation when a child is bullying an adult? So what to do in this case?
Yes, they bullied me. It's hard. So I've seen it in multiple situations where students will bully adults, and I've been bullied by children too. So here's the first important is identifying the behavior, and when you see it, if it's happening to you, emotionally regulating and being like, this has nothing to do with me. It really doesn't. The child is hurting. They're coming from a place of hurt and they're trying to hurt me. So I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to stay calm, and I'm going to ask questions such as, why are you doing this? Or why are you saying this? Are you okay? Is everything okay? So using your emotional skills to de-escalate. Now, if it's not you, right, and it's another adult, so we talked about power, right? It's reestablishing the power between the adult and the child by having strong boundaries and expectations, being like, if it's a younger child, being like, this is not appropriate behavior. I want to remind you. Having other professionals to support that adult is very important. So it's knowing your resources within the school. So when I worked in schools, it was a little harder because we didn't have all these resources. So I would have a buddy, another professional with me, that if in case things escalated, I could go get help, right? And then if this child was bullying me and they're younger, it's easier to address the child. But if it's a teenager, I was once threatened. I will never forget this story. I was in a school and a child threatened my life, and I was actually carrying my daughter. So I was pregnant and I got really scared. I questioned my life decision of what I was doing in that moment, but just for a second. And what I did is, this sounds so silly, but it's her brain. So sometimes by the way we stand, it can exude power. And I had remembered this by a video I watched, a TED Talk. And in the moment, the boy who's said, listen, I am not here to make your life miserable. I am not here to cause trouble. I need you to help me so that we can calm down, because this situation is just escalating. Now, I was talking in a calm voice. I was terrified, but I kept my body position, my hands on my hips, and I started to take room. Another situation, if you're being bullied by someone and you're sitting down and they're standing, you need to stand up. So power is shown in different ways. The importance is to understand is, how do you reestablish power? So by standing up and standing eye to eye with your student can be really helpful, because you're reestablishing power. By taking more room with your body, it's establishing power. By using tones that are calm and direct and not raising your voice, so not showing emotion in your voice, can redirect the situation. So it's really about you using your tools within you to address the situation. Secondly, find a buddy, find someone that can help you, right? If you're stuck in a situation, right? And really address the situation immediately so you can rectify the behavior. Now, after I took the room and I was able to calm the student, I got help immediately because I was threatened. And the student actually went to anger management school for a little bit, because obviously he had some problems. But the good thing is, in our discussion, I told him that I know he didn't believe me, but I was here to help him. And that I promised that, once he got the help he needed, I am here to listen to him and be there. Kept my hands on my hips and I kept my position, right? He went to anger management school. And a month later, he found me and he chased me down the hallway. And I was terrified when I saw him. And he came face to face to me. And he wanted to say that he was sorry, that he apologized for what he did, and that I actually made a difference that day because I stood up to him and I got him the help he needed. And believe me, I was crying with him when he said he apologized. It was the most powerful moment in my career, that by standing up to him and getting him the help, he changed. And I feel like I made a difference in his life, and he made a difference in mine, because now I get to share this story with all of you and you won't forget that. So that's my little tidbit.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really, yeah, an experience. And then we have one more question. And what about parents? The parents who bully educators. Are there any stories about that?
I've been bullied by parents. Yep. Educators are like superheroes. It is so difficult. We're managing students, laws, policies, and parents. It's like you're a full superhero. So often what I would do with parents is I would listen to their side of the story, and I would use empathy and compassion. And I would try to remove myself from blaming them for things that happen, because they could be unaware, or it might be very difficult for them to admit that something's going on. So coming from a place of compassion and understanding can be helpful. Now, here's the trick or the tip that's really important. When parents come to you, is asking a lot of questions, being curious, being compassionate and thoughtful, and sometimes setting boundaries. So here's what I do with parents. I say, you know what? I really want to hear what you have to say, but it's really difficult for us to have a conversation right now because I feel like you're yelling at me. And when you're raising your voice at me, I don't feel comfortable, and I want to make sure that I can really listen to you. So is it okay if we start over? Right? If parents are calling you names or threatening you, which has happened to me too, I say, listen, let's take a deep breath and let's start over. Or, I don't think you mean this. I think there's something going on. Can we take a step and think about what we can do so we can treat each other with respect? Also, coming to the table prepared is very important, because if you're not prepared, sometimes you can get bombarded with stuff. So knowing as much as you can before you get to the table is critical for you. Also, setting expectations in your parent meetings and parent interactions, meaning that you're clear about how you will be treated and how you treat others. So having clear expectations and boundaries. So if a parent does something that doesn't feel good or you don't agree with, you have the right to say, hi, yeah, that is not okay. This is not how I want my students to treat me. And so I'd appreciate it if we don't treat each other that way. So these are all what we call transition statements that are helpful to use. But what you can do, what's in your control, is your emotional reaction, it's your response, right? And it's your behavior. So, you know what I do with my other professionals is sometimes we just practice. We just role play situations so that when it happens, I have a set of tools or ideas, because I don't know if you're like me, but I am an overthinker. So I think through all the situations. So sometimes if I play them out, I have different strategies to help me, because everyone here has a different teaching style and a different personality. So you've got to figure out what works with you. But the first key is to practice. So that's my tip.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kortney. All your answers are just brilliant. And I hope that these pieces of advice will help our educators to face and combat parent bullying. Sometimes it happens like this way. So you don't hear from the parents for a long time, but then all of a sudden you see that they just, they address some ministry or any kind of department of education just with like not to sue you, but they just express their their anger in a different way, not to your face. So unfortunately, we do have this in our countries, and sometimes educators can just leave school because of that, because of this inequality, because they just don't understand why it happened to them. So yeah, we do have this problem.
Oh, that is so sad. That breaks my heart. That's really difficult. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I promise it will be our final question. I really hope that we will stay in touch, because all this energy you gave us today, it's something we will bear in our hearts for a long time. So we don't want to lose you, and we hope that we will be in touch in some time in the future. So thank you again. And there is one more question, and I really hope that we will make one more session like that in some time, that will help the educators to be more successful in their activities. So we will not say goodbye. We will say see you soon. So the very last question, according to your experience, how much time does an educator need to, let's say, not to provide, not to prevent bullying, but to create this, like MVP of a school anti-bullying climate?
So all it takes is developing one new thing, right? And trying it and being consistent with it. And find your thing, find what works for you. Find what works with your classroom, because there's a ton of tools and strategies, and there's these big programs, right? And they're wonderful. But sometimes they don't work in your classroom because your children are different. Every classroom is different. So you know the answers, right? You know how your children react and what they need. So find one thing and stick to that one thing, and then make it a habit, and then try another thing, and then make it a habit. What I've seen where a lot of problems occurred is when you have 2-3 programs and all these strategies, and like, you are exhausted. There's too much going on for you, right? So just try one thing and see if it works. And if it's saying hi to each other in the morning, if it's having a special handshake, if it's writing gratitude cards, right? So what I'm going to send you is all the tips and tricks I have. So what I do want you to do is try just one, not the 20 of them, because that's too much. But find what's right for you, because going back to the last session about the magic wand is, I want you to figure out what wand would work for you, and what type of educator do you want to be? Because by building positive climate, we reduce bullying. Bullying will always be a thing because there's a lot of hurt people in this world. But if we can use some tools to help them feel safe, seen, and heard, we can reduce bullying. And then we can address it before it becomes too big. Now, the parents, sometimes that's another ball game. That's a little harder. But in your classroom, that's your thing. This is why you come to school every day, because you're amazing at what you do and you love it. This is your calling, right? So figure out what works for you and believe in yourself, because it's all about you. You're making the difference. And by empowering your students, you're giving them the tools to reduce bullying, right? Because it's peer-to-peer interaction that matters the most. So just for one day, tell yourself on your strength card, write it down, I am a superhero, and here's what I'm going to do. And that's all the difference.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much, Kortney. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think while we were talking about this question, we have some comments in the chat that maybe some of the participants were interested in creating an online course with you to gather all the tools and all the strategies, and just to recharge with your energy one more time. So maybe we will be in touch and we'll discuss something like that.
Yay! Yes, I love it. I'd love to be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, just put pluses in the chat for Kortney. And Thank you so much. We really do want to meet you one more time. And even though we are online, we are virtually, we did feel all your energy, and we have this energetic globe. So thank you so much again. I wish you all the success in your research activity, in your practical activity. We wish you more ideas for and more power to share these ideas with all the world community. So thank you again.